When you hit 40 and over, your body starts sending you messages you can't ignore anymore. Mine came in the form of a cholesterol report, but the fix was not a prescription. It was 60 seconds of an extra step. When I started milling my own flour, baking my own bread, my entire health profile changed. This is what simple, strong, resilient looks like over 40, and today I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. All right, let's get into making fresh milled flour and a loaf of bread. So I'm going to go through this the best I can, and you'll see. I'm not a professional video editor. I'm not a professional speaker. I am just somebody who is on a journey to plow through perimenopause, crash into menopause, and try to save my body and my sanity to the best of my ability. So this comes from my cholesterol issue that came up not quite a year ago. No, it wasn't even a year ago. It was, I did my 6-month checkup in April and got the thumbs up that this 2 changes with the phenolic olive oil and changing over to fresh milled flour lowered my cholesterol. So it was October of last year. So not a year ago when it came up. So anyway, I want to show you and encourage you. This is only for encouragement purposes, that you can make and bake flour or fresh milled flour into bread or loaves. Even if you've never done it with all-purpose flour or regular flour, this is just to encourage you that it is so much simpler than what I've seen on the videos. I've watched so many YouTube videos on how to do it, and I'm so glad that I did. There's a lot, way more knowledgeable people than I out there doing it. But after I've done this almost 10 times, I would say. I'm not super experienced, but I have personally learned that I don't have to measure everything to the T. So I don't measure grams. I don't have a scale. I basically use a measuring cup and I eyeball things. I let the dough speak to me. Now, in this case, I made a hard red, a hard white spelt grain mixture. When you do bake loaves of bread, your hard red wheat berries and your hard white wheat berries are going to be your kind of go-to. A lot of people I've learned just from watching videos and such, this is kind of their base for making bread. If you want something that resembles like a Wonder bread, like a white bread, you're going to go with your hard white wheat strictly. If you want something that's more of like a whole wheat style, the hard red wheat comes in. I like to blend these together because from what I understand, the hard red wheat berries seem to be very nutritious, a little bit more so maybe than the hard white wheat, but the nutrition's still there. And spelt is kind of falls more of like an ancient grain, and I like to mix that in there too, just for the nutrition. So this was just kind of my smorgasbord of a loaf of bread that I made the other night. So we'll bring up my measurements here. I used half a cup of the hard red, a cup and a half, so it was heavy on the white, and then a half a cup of spelt. Like I said, you could just go with one or these. You don't have to buy all of these berries. I am enjoying milling the flour and I'm trying different things. So you seriously, if you want to start and you've never done it, I would just go hard white all the way. Bam. Just get a bag of hard white wheat berries. Don't confuse it with soft white wheat berries. Those are used for baking. So if you're going to make cookies, cakes, pie crust, that's where that falls in, because it doesn't form the gluten like the hard red and hard white does. Now gluten, all that is just a chemical reaction between yeast and sugar. That's all it is. So if you have a gluten tolerant, you're not very gluten tolerant, you might be surprised there are some people that can eat milled flour baked goods because it's not using the fake gluten to make things happen. So that said, that's what I used. Hard red wheat, hard white wheat. And you can see I got these from Azure. You can look them up. Now, before I ground the berries, I went ahead and took some water. Make sure you're not using chlorinated water. I have a gravity water filter I use. And just put your little water in a little bowl like I did. This is just like a tiny little salsa bowl. And then I eyeball everything. I don't measure more than I have to. And this is, if I was to guess, probably a tablespoon of Fleischmann's dry yeast. I do have a bag of yeast that I've been using since April of 2019 that's still alive, and I keep it in my freezer. No joke. I have a bag of yeast that I bought during COVID that was the last of it in the store where I was. It was kind of like a farmer's market style store, and it was like a big block. I'm still using it, and it's still alive and active. But I did go ahead and get some Fleshmans because I just wanted to kind of compare, like, am I going to tell a difference between the yeast I've been using for 6 years or the Fleshman's yeast? But Fleshman's yeast you can get at Walmart, you can get it anywhere. So I poured about a tablespoon in there, and you'll see that's lukewarm water. I use a temp of, at least about 100, but no more than 115 degrees because I don't want to kill the yeast. And I added honey. And I just did a little bit of honey for now just to get this kind of going. But I did this before I ever milled the flour. So you will see here in a second. Here comes the honey. Local honey is always best, especially in your area if you can find it. All right. While that's setting, here I am milling my berries. I just mix them all up and pour them in my mixer mill grinder, and I let her rip. This literally took 60 seconds probably. Now, not a lot of people will do this, but you can. I personally like to do it, but I actually will run my flour through a sifter. The bran and the germ will go through the sifter. You'll still get the nutrients. And what I did this time that I don't normally do, because I got to thinking, like, well, if all the nutrition's in the bran and the germ, I need to keep that. And a lot of people don't want it in there because when it's harder to get a rise, and I'll explain that momentarily of what I'm talking about. But for the sakes and purposes of this video, after I milled it, I went ahead and ran it through a sifter, old school sifter, and I'm going to save some of the germ and the bran. There you go. That's me sifting. By the time I got done sifting all this, I wound up with about 3 cups of flour, and you'll see that here in a second. Okay, that's the bran and the germ. Now, you can discard this and you can give it to your chickens if you got them. They would love this. I saved a little bit this time to put on top of my bread. Normally I had discarded, but like dawned on me, like, hello, you want all the nutrients and vitamins that come from this. So I did save about this much that you see here to throw on top of my loaf of bread before I baked it. But it still goes through. The bran and the germ will crunch through that and fall into your flour. So you can see it there. So I've got about 3 cups of flour that I am using for this loaf of bread. All right, so next, as you can see, we have some fermentation going on with our yeast, our honey, and our water, non-chlorinated water. You have trouble with your yeast, use non-chlorinated water, which just means like a filtered water. So there we go. I have moved my flour into my, my KitchenAid. My KitchenAid, and I threw in an egg. I've learned that an egg, and instead of using water as my liquid for my bread loaf, this recipe I used raw warm milk, and you'll see in a second. So I have 1 egg in there for my 3 cups of flour, and then I threw in my yeast, which you can kind of see on the right-hand side there, and my honey. Now this dough enhancer, I'm not a big person on putting preservatives back in my food, but this is a sunflower lectin powder that is awesome. I saw it on a YouTube video, and it is fantastic. So here's what happens. When you use regular all-purpose flour or bread flour, commercial flour that you buy at the store to make bread, you don't have the germ or the bran, which is where all your nutrients are housed. When you remove all of that, you're just left with starch. You're left with no nutrients and just empty nutrition for your body. So that's why you're able to get a good rise. You've pulled the germ and the bran out. And what I mean by that is as the yeast is fermenting with the flour and the starches and the honey and doing all these things, and you leave the bran and the germ in, carbon dioxide is a byproduct coming off of that. And the germ and the bran, just imagine it has like sharp edges. They're popping the bubbles. And so that keeps the rise down. When you remove the bubble poppers, which is the bran and the germ, that's how you get the rise in commercial flour. With fresh milled flour, it needs a little bit of help, I have learned. So I will use dough enhancer, and this is 1/4 of a teaspoon per cup of flour. I have it right here. 1/4 of a teaspoon per cup of flour. And that's what I put in while I'm mixing my dough. So it is a consideration and it does really work, and it does, in my opinion, make a big difference. And I did buy this on Amazon, and a little goes a long way. I just keep it in the freezer with my yeast. If you're not keeping your yeast in the freezer or the refrigerator, you need to. For long-term storage, like my 6-year-old yeast, put it in the freezer and then get it out, get what you need out, an hour or 30 minutes or 20 minutes before you bake, and get it to room temp. Doesn't take long. So there's the dough enhancer. And then I got raw milk. I have a farm that I go to that's local. I get raw milk, whole milk. Love it, love it, love it. I heated this up. This is maybe about a cup. And this is why I'm not giving you exact measurements, because I never know how much milk I'm actually going to need, or water. You don't have to use milk. I have used water just fine and made bread. It's a little bit more crumbly, but it is perfectly fine. But I wanted to be fancy pants, and I did raw milk, and I got my temperature. I put it, that's about a cup, and I had it in the microwave maybe 30 seconds, and I made sure that it was about no more than 115 degrees, because you don't want to kill the yeast, but you don't want it cold to not get any yeast to go. And now I'm mixing here. So this is my dough, my yeast, my enhancer, and my milk and my egg. Notice I have not put any oil in my dough or salt. I know most people will put oil and salt right in. I have learned in my experience, my limited experience, that if I put oil in my bread dough, sometimes I don't get the rise that I want. I save the oil for oiling the bread pan. That's the only way I use oil, and you'll see here momentarily what that looks like. Salt, I will put salt in this because I've heard and read that salt can inhibit the rise also, and it may stun the yeast and not encourage it to want to rise. So I'll keep the salt out at this point. It does find its way into the bread dough. So I will do this for about 5 minutes. I will start this process, for about 5 minutes and let it run. When it gets to that point, when it gets to be kind of a wet dough, and it's okay to have a little bit of a wetter dough because fresh milled flour absorbs more moisture than regular commercial flour, I will do this. I'll just look at a timer. I'll look at my coffee maker, and I'll be like, okay, 5 minutes from now, I will check my dough. I run my KitchenAid on a speed of 2 when I do this. So after 5 minutes on speed of 2, once I got it all mixed together and it looks like it's flopping around good, flinging itself everywhere, let her go for 5 minutes. I'm going to check for what they call a window pane. I pull the dough and stretch it to see if the gluten is starting to form. Typically, I go 5 minutes and I check. I never stop at 5 minutes. I have learned so far I need to run it another 3 minutes, 4 minutes, no more than an extra 5 minutes, and get the gluten formed. As you're spinning that and doing that, that's kind of what happens. So here we go. Now I'm going to rest. And yes, that is a Walmart shower cap on top of my bowl. So at this point, I have taken my dough ball, which I don't get a lot of dough on my fingers, and I'll just form it to a nice little ball, make sure there's no real seams on it, and just set it in my bowl. This bowl's not even greased. If you notice, I didn't even grease my KitchenAid bowl. The oil has not found its way into my dough yet. So I will leave it like this. So this whole process that I just showed you so far on this video took me 30 minutes. The only reason it would have taken me that long was because I was trying to make clips of video for you. So that being said, if I hadn't had my phone trying to make little clips of what I was doing, this whole process would have been done in probably 20 minutes. That's it. So put the shower cap on it, find your microwave or your oven, don't turn it on or anything. Put it in there on a summer day like today, even with your air running, and let it sit. I let this sit for a couple of hours. So go off and run your errands, go to the bank, do whatever. And the puppy dogs always get the leftover milk. Well, not always. They did today. Now here's where my salt will find itself. After my dough has sat for a couple hours and you see the rise, because you can tell. If you don't believe it, take a picture of it before you put the shower cap on, and then take a picture of it in a couple hours. You will get a rise out of the dough. So I use Redmond's real salt. It's just where I've landed. I like it. Been using it for a few years now, and I can always refill my salt. So it's out of Utah, and I think a lot of people wind up using it because it's mined in the United States. So there's my salt. I'll use maybe a teaspoon. Here's kind of my rise, I think. I might have mixed up my video, but there is a rise. At this point, I will pull that dough out. If you'll just wet your hands a little bit with a little bit of water. You don't need to put oil on your hands, just a little bit of cool water. Make sure it's not chlorinated water. You'll be able to pick up this dough and you'll be able to form it. Now, I don't go into a whole kneading process because I already did all the kneading. And this is supposed to be simple. So I will take that teaspoon of salt, pour it on there, pick up my dough with my moist hands and just kind of work it in. I don't even work it in that long. And then now I want to make my loaf of bread shape. And now you're going to see where the oil comes in. I will have a little bit of olive oil in my bread bowl, which is glass, and you can be generous on your oil coating. You don't have to go super light on it. I don't like doing a lot of dishes, so I go a little heavy on the oil when I coat that, and I will coat this thing all the way around even here. Because you can see this is 3 cups of flour. If I would have had more like 4 cups, this is gonna come out. This is gonna rise and come out, and I don't want it to stick. I don't like doing a lot of dishes. I will take my shower cap back on after that first rise, after I shaped it, put my salt on it and oiled my bread pan, and I put it right back in the bowl and put my shower cap right back on and put it right back in the microwave or the oven. And I will let this rise for no more than another hour. I think this time I did about 45 minutes. I probably wouldn't do any less than 30, but I did 45 minutes and then it was time to go in the oven. I preheated my oven to 400 degrees and I used a Dutch oven. Now I like my Dutch oven because this pan will sit perfectly widthwise in my Dutch oven without the bottom touching the bottom of the Dutch oven pan. It's awesome. No, I do not put any water or anything on the bottom of this. I put the lid on this and I will cook this for 30 to 40 minutes. No less than 30 minutes, usually about 40 minutes, 45 tops. And then I will take the lid off and cook the rest of the way, another 15 or 20 minutes with the lid off. And I check the internal temp of my bread and it should get to close to 200 degrees. You don't want, if it's 190, you got to let it go a little bit more. You should let it go a little bit more, or you're going to have kind of a chewy middle. But if you can hit 200, no more than 205, and you're in the thickest part of your loaf of bread is done. And it only takes an hour. You already done all the upfront work, and there's our loaf of bread. And that's where I got it out, and it's cooling. If you notice, I put this on a makeshift cooling rack. I don't really have a proper cooling rack, but I've learned that if you just stick this like on a cutting board or a pan, it's still got moisture in it, and the bottom or whatever is sitting on that is going to get soggy. You want to aerate it. So you'll see people turn it on its side. Sometimes I'll rotate it, but give this a little time to cool off. Try not to cut into it right away. It is hot. But it is fabulous, but it's hot. I bet I waited 20 or 30 minutes. And finally, I was waiting, but someone in the house couldn't wait, and they came and cut into it. Probably 15 minutes after I got it out of the oven. So that's why I didn't get a picture of the whole loaf, because Mr. Don cut into my bread, our bread. So that's kind of what it looks like. And that's fresh milled loaf of bread. Now this bread here, is so much nutrition. The honey in it made it sweet. It wasn't that crumbly. The egg and the milk help with that, especially whole milk, especially raw milk. That was a good call on my part. And now this bread, today is Tuesday. I cooked this on Friday afternoon, early evening, and it's still sitting there. We got a little bit left and it's still good. Now it needs to probably go ahead and get eaten up, but this bread has kept perfectly fine. And all this was to do was just to encourage you to try fresh milled flour to make some bread. If you're having a cholesterol issue, if you're having a blood pressure issue, these are the 2 things, little changes that I made to try to fix my cholesterol and get my blood work where it needed to be, because I'm hell-bent on figuring out food for medicine. And that's what I wanted to say at the end of the video. If you stuck in with me through the video, thank you very much. This one was a rough one to work with the audio and the video, and it was challenging, but I learned some things, and I appreciate you. I really do that you did stick to the end, because it looks easy until you do it, and some videos are easy to do, some are not, and we're still learning. So anyway, if you found value in this, please let me know in the comments. If you try this, let me know in the comments. Just try changing 1 to 2 things. Try it for 3 to 6 months And the numbers don't lie, okay? So numbers don't lie. I just want to encourage you to try this if you're having trouble with cholesterol and blood pressure and things along that lines. This could help you. All right, until next time, stay simple, stay strong.